Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sellerscale Show. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Gregory Elfrink. He's the director of marketing at Empire Flippers, which is a B2B marketplace that helps people buy and sell online businesses. Today, I want to discuss topics such as how Empire Flippers operates, whether or not you should buy an Amazon business, and if you do, what kind of metrics you should look at, and just the future of Amazon FBA and e-commerce in general. Hi, Greg. It's nice to have you.
Thanks for having me, Sergey. I'm glad to be here. Hopefully, we'll be able to provide some value for your audience.
Definitely. To start off our conversation, do you mind sharing with the audience how you got started working with Empire Flippers and online marketing in general?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep it to the TLDR because it can be a quite long story. But I started like most internet marketers, working in the oil fields of Alaska as a roughneck. So pretty common route. Yeah. But I always wanted to get into marketing. I always loved internet marketing. I always knew there was this other world on this internet world that my crew in the oil field, they used to call me like Google Cash. Like, how's Google doing today? Because, I was obsessed with SEO and getting a content marketer. But yeah, I hated the job. I had this like gritty nihilism at this point. Like, I'm just gonna like pay off my debt writing cheap articles as a freelance writer because I'm a big time writer too. I love writing.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was doing that for a while in addition to like my 12-hour days in the oil field. And then I saw the Empire Flippers. I'm like, oh, I'm going to build an affiliate site, and I'm going to like get out of the oil field, move to some like crappy apartment in Las Vegas, and just never have to be in the oil field again. That was my goal. And they sent out an email saying, hey, we're looking for a content marketing apprentice. So like, screw it. Every agency I've ever applied for has said no to me because I don't have a college degree.
Right.
I'll get this rejection letter too. Why not? So I apply, and I ended up getting the job. And funny enough, and we could probably talk about this as is quite topical right now with a lot of people, but we're a 100% remote team, right? So
Okay.
my bosses, the co-founders, when they brought me out for training about 4 years ago, it was to Vietnam, which is where I am now. And my boss in the oil field at the time, he was like one of my best bosses. He was like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm going to getting into marketing. He's like, oh, you always wanted to do that. Where at? Like, well, I'm moving to Vietnam. He's like, Greg, I love you, man, but is this real? So like, I don't know. I guess I'll find out when I show up. But yeah. So I've been with EF for about 4 years now. Went from just basically a content specialist, right, to the content manager,
Right.
and now I'm the head of marketing more or less at EF, the director of marketing. So it's been a crazy, awesome ride. I absolutely love what we get to do. I get to talk to really cool people like you all the time, and help out sellers and buyers, and make some real life-changing decisions. Like when someone exits their business or buys a business, could be a very significant opportunity or engine of change, which really fires me up. So.
Amazing. And I totally can resonate with remote team. I mean, at Sellerscale, we have a completely remote team. Part of the team is in Moscow in Russia. I'm in London. Our CEO is based in LA and Latin America right now. So yeah,
Oh, wow.
I mean,
Awesome.
I think that's kind of the future of work and the future of startups.
So you're probably in the same scenario as me right now. Seeing all these
Yeah,
people, like how to work from home. Like, how do you do it? Like, it's not that hard, guys. Like,
I've been doing it for like 4 years.
Rocket science.
Yeah, absolutely.
You open up your laptop.
Yeah. I mean, speaking about buying and selling businesses, who do you work with more, buyers or sellers right now?
So it's always a mixture, right? So in order for you to build a successful marketplace, which is technically what we are, even though we are also M&A brokers because we provide those M&A services, you have two customers you're really serving. So you have the buyer and the seller.
Problem, right?
Exactly. Without both of them, you don't have a service because you need both of them, right? So really it's both at the same time, and they often have different needs. Sometimes it makes it awkward in the marketing because if something is good for buyers, that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for sellers. And we don't try to massage around that, right? We just say like, yeah, this sucks for you. We'll tell you honestly, like, this is not a great deal for you, a great deal for the buyer.
Okay.
But or vice versa, depending on what we're talking about. But yeah, so I work with both. I will say Buyers tend to be a lot more diverse though, from all walks of life. So they're a little bit harder to pin down to find.
What's like the typical buyer? What does a typical buyer look like? Is it like some person with savings, or maybe they exited some other businesses? Do they usually have experience or not?
Yeah, a good question. So we have several different buyer personas that we look at in our marketing. The most common is the person we call newbie norm. So someone
Okay.
just starting out. Now, newbie norm might not have online business experience necessarily, but that also doesn't mean that they don't have a lot of money. They could be, very, very wealthy, even super affluent, say like in real estate investing or stocks or some other offline business, right? So it doesn't
Right.
necessarily mean that they are like, naive to entrepreneurship or anything. Just they don't have much experience with online businesses. So they'll be asking more basic questions and stuff like that. But that it will probably always be the lion's share of who buyers are, just because we're growing the market so fast that the vast majority of buyers, of course, are going to be new. But
Right.
there's tons of different types of buyers. We have, well, you mentioned one actually. We have a lot of sellers that they'll
Uh-huh.
come and sell a few businesses with us, and then they use that capital to buy businesses from us, grow them, and then sell those businesses with us again for much more. And that one we call
Oh,
flip
okay.
the thread. So
Okay.
there's a bunch of different personas. Some people, they're looking to build a portfolio of profit producing businesses. Others are actually raising money, like from PE, family offices, and even venture capital is starting to get into the game a little bit, and they go and buy a bunch of businesses and roll them up. So we have
Okay. So,
one client
okay.
who did just that last year. They raised like I think $100 million to acquire FBA businesses. So
Oh, interesting. So it's not that your service is like, for example, I call my flip a business and I just forget about you. You do have loyal customers, loyal users that come back over and over again, just flip businesses like they do on eBay, for example, right?
yeah, absolutely. Sellers are a little bit less common to repeat, just because like in order to build up that business, it takes time, right, to get it
Right.
ready to sell. So a prolific seller might sell between 3 to 5 businesses a year, and that's like very prolific.
Oh,
But they'll
wow. Yeah.
come back. They'll come back like every other year when they have a new one built up or something that they want to exit. Buyers, they tend to come back more often because they're well funded and they're looking to acquire as
Right.
many
Right.
assets as
Right.
they can. But yeah, that's a big thing to us, that we have returning customers, because that tells us we're doing something right, right? If
Exactly.
if they never
Exactly.
return, then like, okay, that might be a bad sign. Something bad might have happened
Right.
after they
Right. Right.
acquired
Right.
us.
It's just that the industry of buying selling businesses. I mean, it sounds like it's not industry when you have a lot of returning customers. So yeah, I mean, it's awesome that you do though.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I wonder, how does an entrepreneur decide whether to buy an existing business or start one from scratch? Because like when you see a buyer, there's always this trade-off whether you should build a business or whether you
Mhm.
should just buy one. So I wonder how that thought process looks like. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on where you are at personally and what your goals are personally too. So a lot changes based off those variables. But what I typically tell people is, if you have more time than money, then you probably should be building. You should probably
Mm,
be building it from scratch, because you can really bootstrap it, right? Like you'll be
mm,
hard pressed to find a deal that's severely under market value on Empire
yeah.
Flippers, right? We know how to value them. So it's very rare. You're going to get a good deal. You're going to get a quality business, but you're not going to get like a crazy deal, like no money down, like
Yeah, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
real estate thing, like that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I would probably tell you to build from scratch in that case. Now, if you have more money than time, or if you have a lot of money and a lot of time, even, I would suggest buying if your goal is to go fast, because buying a
Uh-huh.
business, it just speeds the process up dramatically, right? Like you skip so many of the foundational steps. Like let's take Amazon FBA. You skip the product research, you skip finding and sourcing the supplier and manufacturer, the logistic chain, getting it up on Amazon in the warehouse, testing Amazon PPC ads if you're using those,
Right.
or whatever other marketing machines you're using, right? And not only do you get to skip all that, but you already know if it worked, right? Because the business is already making money, it already has data, so you can instantly be making profit right away. And it's often easier to go from say 5 grand to 10 grand a month than 0 to 1 grand a month.
Yeah,
Often is the
absolutely.
case. So
Absolutely.
if you want to go fast, buying is the way to go, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But again, it comes down to what you want to do. What are your goals? Because that's really what's the most important.
Right, and it probably depends on the personality. And to me, I think that buying and flipping and investing in a business is so much different from building one from scratch, right? Basically, like an entrepreneur and an investor, they're basically two different vocations. You cannot confuse them. Uh,
There's a lot of truth to that. Yeah.
yeah, but for people who aren't familiar with buying a business, do you mind explaining what the process looks like, what the entire process looks like?
Sure. So it's pretty straightforward. We try to make it as simple as possible. So we just launched our new marketplace platform. We're launching our new public website here soon, so it'll match the new platform. But you can basically log in now to an Empire Flippers account, and you can filter all the businesses we have for sale by the different attributes you want. So like if you only want to look at something that has a trademark or has X amount of SKUs or whatever, you can do that. So that speeds up your due diligence process quite quickly. Once you find one you like, you can put down a deposit. Oh, sorry, we're changing that terminology. Unlock the listing. You can unlock the listing and learn more about the business from there. We also do these things called seller interviews. So that's something my team does on the marketing side,
Okay.
where if a business is worth over 45K, we'll actually interview the seller. So that way you as the buyer, you can hear who the seller is, what they care about before you make any
Mm.
kind of commitment at all to
Oh,
make
that's
sure like,
great.
yes, this guy seems like I could work with him, right?
Oh, that's
The
great.
last thing you want to do is buy a business from a person that you're like, I absolutely hate this guy. I love the business. I hate this guy though. Because like
Yeah,
you're going to have a little bit of that marriage post sell, right? With the support
absolutely,
and stuff.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's very important. So we do that. Once you have questions, our team of business analysts, they'll answer the vast majority of your questions for you. And they'll also do what is called a criteria discovery call with you. So they
Mhm.
want to make sure that you are looking at a business that makes sense for both your goals and your current skill sets. So we'll tell you if we think like this might be a bad decision for you, right? Like if you were looking at a $2 million SaaS business we have for sale, right?
Right.
And you have no online business experience at all. You've never coded. You've never managed anyone before. Like maybe you're a plumber and nothing against plumbers. I was an oil field roughneck and I learned marketing, right? And not saying it's impossible, but that might not be a good decision for your very first
Yeah,
business, right?
absolutely,
Maybe
absolutely.
we should go with something a little bit simpler and then graduate to the SaaS business, right? So we
Mhm.
want to make sure the buyers are in a good position too. So after that criteria discovery call, we find you a business that you like. We answer as many questions as we can. Then we get you on what is called a buyer seller conference call with that seller. Uh, that's where usually the no negotiations happen on that. It's just like the
Mhm.
meet and greet, answering any more intimate questions that might need to be answered. And after that is usually when offers start happening and negotiations start happening. Once the business
Mhm.
is sold, we're the only broker that does this as far as I'm aware, but we actually help you transfer the business over as well. So we have a whole department dedicated to transferring the asset over to the new owner.
Interesting. And you mentioned that there are certain categories that are easier for newbies, as you call them, than others. What are the best categories in terms of ROI when you're just starting out?
Yeah, that's a good question. And like so many of my answers, the answer is it depends, right? Because that newbie norm might be a really good coder, right? So maybe a
Right.
SaaS does make sense for them. But what I would say
But
traditionally
if
the
you're not technical,
easiest,
for example, if you're a
yeah,
non-technical entrepreneur, yeah.
yeah, if you're non-technical, I think the two easiest business models to really wrap your head around is probably content sites. So
Okay.
that'd be affiliate, AdSense, and then Amazon FBA. So
Hmm.
the nice thing about Amazon FBA, even though you do have a lot more moving parts with like logistics and supply chains and stuff, there's all sorts of information out there, very similar to content sites that can really help you change the game, that you can really educate yourself. And there's a bunch of great
Right.
tools like you guys, right? At Sellerscale,
Right.
you guys
Right.
are helping with the financials. There's all sorts of tools and people who walked the road that you're about to walk that you can really leverage. So FBA is nice in that sense, and this is less the case nowadays. But back in the day when Amazon was really pumping organic traffic, I used to say Amazon FBA is like e-commerce on training wheels in the sense that it allows you to really just focus on the logistics supply chain side, and it takes care of a lot of the heavy lifting in the marketing side for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Less the case nowadays, but still relatively true. So I think it's just a great starting place for people.
Yeah, you still have to focus a lot on promotion and marketing and listing
Yeah.
optimization right now. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Like Amazon FBA is one of the easiest businesses to start, and no wonder that it made so many millionaires in the US right now, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing what the service has done. You know, good on Amazon. They get a lot of flack for like big evil corporation or whatever, but like
Yeah.
what they've done with FBA for small business owners is absolutely brilliant. And I mentioned earlier, I'm a writer. I write fiction for fun, and when they came out with Kindle, I have so many of my indie writer friends now making a full time living from them. So like, I'm hard pressed to hate like the corporate overlord of Jeff Bezos. I think he made some bad decisions, but mostly good decisions.
Right, right. By the way, I actually filtered Amazon FBA on your marketplace recently, and I couldn't find any active listings. Is there an insufficient supply of sellable FBA businesses right now?
I think that might be a glitch. We have a lot of
Okay.
FBA businesses for sale right
Okay.
now. Like I said, I think I said since we started the recording, we're transitioning from the old site to the new site. So there might
Oh,
be
okay.
a bit of a hiccup going on there. But if you log in, like if you go to empireflippers.com/register and you create an account for our like actual marketplace that lets you filter everything, you'll see dozens and dozens of FBA businesses. I think we have like 119 businesses altogether, not just FBA, but altogether for sale right now in the marketplace. And usually between 42 to 63% of those are FBA.
Oh, awesome. Amazing. Oh, that's good news.
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
There's still
yeah.
people are still selling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And with the hype around Amazon FBA, I mean, like a lot of people say that it's too late to get into Amazon FBA in 2020. I wonder whether it makes sense to buy an Amazon FBA business right now, given the increasing competition is in the market, as opposed to building one from scratch. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So on the first point there, that's kind of like the oversaturation argument, right? Which
Right.
like I personally hate the oversaturation argument because like yes, you could use that as a crutch, but it's very rarely true is the thing. Like I always tell people there's always a new graphic designer who's making 100K a year, right? And
Right.
that is got to be one of the most saturated industries. You have people on Fiverr selling the same service for like $5-10, right? So saturation to me is never has a lot of teeth to me. But what
Uh-huh.
I will say is it is easier to buy an Amazon FBA business than to build one. And the reason why is you don't need to build up all the reviews. You don't need to do all the stuff I
Right.
mentioned
Right.
earlier, right? So it does become a lot easier, which also means you're in a better position to scale that business faster too, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're very well funded, for example, say you buy an Amazon FBA business, a small one, like $150,000 FBA business, and
Mm-hmm.
you have some good cash flow to get the next product break, like you're able to order in bulk bigger than the seller could, then you instantly see a margin gain right there, right? You can't
Right.
do that from a business you're building from scratch because you really don't have anything yet. You have to
Yeah.
build it up to the point where you can make those kind of tweaks.
And you have to go through a certain learning curve, right? You have to teach
Yeah.
yourself marketing, and you have to teach yourself logistics and inventory management and all that stuff. I mean, yeah, it's difficult. And but speaking of buying an Amazon FBA business, how much cash do you have in hand to buy like an average Amazon FBA business if you're starting out?
Yeah, so it depends on the price, but let's say most starting FBA businesses for someone just getting in the space of buying are between $80,000 to $300,000, so
Mm-hmm.
80,000 to $300,000. So that's your starting point there. Now you also need to have enough money on hand to buy the product, the actual inventory, which
Right.
is usually sold at cost. So say it was $100,000 business, they had $20,000 of inventory that $20,000 at cost for the inventory. So that would be $120,000 you need to spend. Now you can do all sorts of deal structuring. Usually not at that level, but you can do like earnouts and stuff like that, where you say it was like a
Mm-hmm.
300K deal, you put 250,000 down, and you pay 50K over a 6 month period. And we actually help
Mm-hmm.
buyers and sellers manage those kind of situations. I would not do it at anything below 100K because you're probably going to miss out on the deal just because there's people with enough money. They're just going to come and buy at
Right.
full list
Right.
price.
Right.
So
Right.
you'll lose the business. But yeah, so that's like the starting route, right?
Right.
In addition, I would have some cash reserves. So probably like an extra 30, 40K that you can use in case of emergencies. I always talk about think of your investment in terms of thirds. So if you have $300,000 to spend on an acquisition, split that into pools of 3. So you can only buy a business at tops $100,000. You buy that business, and now you have 200K in reserves right there, which is very conservative, very helpful, right?
Right.
You probably won't even need all of that. But the idea is that first business you buy, you're probably going to make a lot of mistakes. Even with our guidance, the mistakes happen, right? So you learn all that stuff without it taking you out of the game. So when you go buy the second business with that second pool of 100K, you're going to make a lot better decisions. And then that third business, you'll know exactly what you need and want to do, and you just go from there. So that's what I suggest. Have at least like $20,000 or $30,000 worth of reserves if you're buying in the less than 200K space, and just scale that up within reason as you buy bigger businesses.
Well, I love that. I think that's very helpful, actually. And I also like speaking of failures, right? You mentioned it. I love your idea, which I read in your blog. I think it was Empire Flipper's blog, of valuing a business by looking at its critical points of failure. And since we're talking about Amazon FBA, we're a podcast about Amazon FBA, what are some common critical points of failure that you see with Amazon businesses that Amazon FBA buyers should be familiar with?
Yeah, so the glaring elephant in the room is the biggest critical point of failure for FBA businesses, which is the fact they're on Amazon.
Right.
So you can't really get around that with the FBA business model. But the reason why that that is both an advantage and a disadvantage. But
Right.
the reason why it is a disadvantage is if 100% of your business is hosted on someone else's platform and they change the rules, you don't have a business possibly anymore, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I always tell people, look to diversify, and a lot of FBA entrepreneur friends of mine hate that because they're like, I really know the FBA platform, right? I don't want to. One sec. This is the anxiety, the sneeze. Is my air con blowing dust in my nose? But yeah, so like a lot of my FBA entrepreneur friends, they don't like that because they want to just keep scaling Amazon. So they're like full ships ahead. And then when something changes, they're like, oh, hair on fire. But if they had just diversified, like you don't even have to diversify to the point where you have, a Shopify store. You can go on other marketplaces like House, Walmart, Jet.
Walmart, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's other ways to diversify that risk a little bit. So that's the first big one.
Mm-hmm.
The other common risk that FBA entrepreneurs do is they'll often have like just one SKU. One SKU, like, yeah, that's great that it's successful and profitable, but same thing, like if that SKU falls out of favor, you don't really have a business anymore because you never really built a real brand with multiple different products. You're putting all your eggs in one basket. So when buyers look at a business that has like say 5 SKUs and there's only one SKU that's making a lot of money, they'll probably tell you, I don't want the other 4 SKUs. I'll buy this one SKU, but I'm buying it at a discount because I don't know if it's going to survive or not, if it's going to be a fidget spinner or whatever, So then you're stuck with all this dead inventory now with the other one. So you want to make sure that you have multiple different SKUs, all earning a good portion of the money with no one SKU making up like 70% of the business ideally. You want to have that spread so that way the business is stronger and can weather storms if something happens to one product or one marketing funnel for a product or whatever, right? So those are some common things, and getting off of Amazon's platform also is a huge help. The other thing that is something that is very difficult to do with FBA, but I would tell people to try to do it as much as possible, is own your audience, own your customer data, right? So try to get that email list built up. Whatever you have to do within Amazon's terms of services, don't break their terms of services, but do try to get that list, because that is one of the most valuable things in business. And unfortunately, Amazon does make it very difficult for you to do that.
What are some of the ways that you can build an email list when you're selling on Amazon?
Yeah, so this might not be with terms of service because I'm not an FBA seller, so I don't know all the terms of service. But I have friends that do some different things. So like one thing is like they'll get people to go to their website. Like their website is in the product packaging. So they'll get them to come to the website, give them like a free gift or something like that. Some of them actually monetize that as well. Like I have friends who like sell like skincare stuff, and when they send a package to people, there's like a letter that says go to my website and download this ebook or whatever on skincare. Yeah. And in that ebook there'll be a bunch of affiliate links to other like related products, so they actually monetize their customers that way as a little tiny upsell, right? So that's one way you can do it. Any visitors to that website you can retarget. But that's the main one I know of. I'm sure there's a tons of other ways. I think there's actually a software. This is like a couple years ago, man. So it might be like against terms of service now, but Amazon used to allow this one software to help you collect the email addresses, which doesn't sound like Amazon would probably allow that today.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they used to allow it as part of their API, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that anymore. So this is another reason why I said that Amazon FBA is a good place to start, because this is the kind of question, like, it's not an esoteric business model. There's a lot of people talking about it. So there's a lot of people who have figured out this problem already, that you can go into like Facebook groups, hit people up on LinkedIn, and they'll
Right,
probably just tell you best practices of what's worked for them, right? You
right.
cannot do that in a lot of other emerging business models that don't have as big of a foothold as something like FBA does. So that's, again, one of the advantages of your starting off.
Right, and I think another thing that we should mention about Amazon is that a lot of sellers are afraid that Amazon eats up their margins with creating their private label products, right? And I think
Mhm.
this is something for more experienced sellers. And a lot of sellers are afraid of that, and they try to diversify in Shopify and Walmart. So yeah, I mean, the lesson here is diversify, diversify, diversify. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Uh, but I wonder, how do you go about valuing an Amazon FBA business in general at Empire Flippers? What kind of metrics do you focus on, and what kind of metrics should someone considering buying a business should look at?
Yeah, those are great questions. So I mentioned a little bit of it. We do look at how many SKUs you have, for example, right? We
Right.
want to make sure that nothing is making up the lion's share, ideally, that it's a good spread. So like some people think that means like, oh, I should have 500 SKUs, or like, no, that's not what that's not what that means. You like, ideally a buyer likes a business that has between 3 to 8 SKUs, so 3 to 8 products. The reason
Mm-hmm.
why is it's not too many that it can be a real hassle to manage, and it's not too small, so there's a little bit diversified there, right? There's several different products in the brand. So that's what buyers like to see, and that's what we like to see. The two main levers, though, of evaluation is going to be history of profitability. So how old is the business and how long has it been making money? Because
Right.
the older it is, the more likely it is to be able to weather storms, because it probably has weathered at least a couple storms if it's a few years old, at least, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
other big lever is your average net profit. So at Empire Flippers, we value things based off of a monthly multiple versus like annual EBITDA, because internet businesses can change so drastically from month to month.
Right.
So like we look at that average 12 months of net profit on your business,
Mm-hmm.
and we use that to define the multiple. And the multiple itself is based off of things like site age, business age, SKU amount, how many shipping suppliers you have. You have an email list. All that kind of stuff goes into it. But the
Mm-hmm.
two
Mm-hmm.
main factors are how old is the business and how profitable is the business. So the more you can make that business more profitable, then the business is going to be worth more. But you got to be careful on that, because that some sellers think that means like, oh, I'm just going to fire all my employees, so that way my business is very profitable. Like, yes, your business is technically worth more, but no one wants it now because no one wants to buy a job. So you
Exactly.
got to also
Exactly.
make it attractive to the buyer and investor, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And does having a brand register, does it increase the price of a business?
Yes and no. So like we find that brand registry like that and trademarks in general does help to sell your business. So it's kind of like an attractive thing versus more of
Okay.
a valuation thing. Now there are times where it does help your valuation, especially if it's a trademark or a patent on like a specific kind of technology or design form that really adds some like unique IP to the business. Then yes, that will help the valuation. But typically for most trademark products we've seen on FBA, it's not so much of a valuation booster as much as an attractive booster. So buyers love to see it, so they're more likely to buy the business, but that doesn't necessarily increase the value.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, got that, got that. What should people who are new to e-commerce do in 2020 and beyond? Taking everything we discussed so far, the buying businesses having this option, and the fact that Amazon FBA is oversaturated, but you don't really believe that. So if you're starting an e-commerce in 2020 right now, what should you do?
Yeah, so like I do think it is harder to start FBA business today than it was a few years ago, but there's always more opportunity to find like how to get it started. I have friends launching new products all the time, and they're doing fine, right? So,
Okay.
but what I would say is start small, be conservative. don't make wild gambits, wild risks. If you have $100,000 to play with, you shouldn't be taking out a loan so you can buy a 150K business, right? You should be conservative with that. Things in online business can grow very, very, very quickly. So like to double your investment in online business, it is far easier, in my opinion, to do that with online businesses than say real estate. And while real estate is less risky than online businesses, if you wanted to double your return in real estate in the same kind of time period, you'd have to do extremely risky things in real estate to do that versus
Yeah, right.
online businesses. So keep that in mind. Start conservative because it can grow fast. Don't diversify too soon. Diversity is important, but you should really master one marketing channel, understand how supply chain works for you first before you diversify at all, because that is a common mistake people make. Like, oh, I'm going to run Facebook ads, Google ads, Amazon ads. Like, well, you never
Right.
learned
And
any
they
of them
spread
yet.
themselves
So
too thin, right?
exactly. And now
Yeah.
you're losing your money, your power of money too, because you're putting in all these different baskets that you don't understand how they work. So focus on one thing first. And the first thing you should probably diversify isn't so much the platform, but your supplier. And I think
Right.
with this coronavirus stuff that's going on right now, I think that
Absolutely.
lesson
Yeah.
is really hitting home for people. There's a bunch of different places you can do it. I'm in Vietnam right now. Vietnam has a supply chain nowhere near as good as China. I don't think anyone is as good as China at this, but it doesn't, like, just having backup suppliers can be extremely helpful. And you can even have backup suppliers in the USA that aren't your main supplier, but they're there in case of moments of crisis, like when China was locked down for a month, right? You could have
Right.
supplemented your products with that factory. Also, it's good to forecast your inventory. Don't just be just in time, because if you only have products for just now, like just this week or whatever, then something happens to your supply chain, it destroys the business, right? Or
Yeah.
could destroy the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
So, but on the same token, don't go overboard. If you have $100,000 business with $150,000 worth of inventory, that's also not good. So it's a
Yeah, there needs
balancing
to be a balance, right?
act.
Absolutely. Greg, that was great. I have one last question for you. It's our
Sure.
traditional question. It's actually a question from Peter Thiel's book, Zero to One. What is your contrarian view that goes against the commonly accepted notions in the industry? Basically, what truth do very few people agree with you on?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That's
Well, I have gotten flack for the diversity thing that I tell people to do. So I guess I'd go with that. It's a boring answer because I've been talking about diversity this whole
Mm-hmm.
podcast. But yeah, like I have a lot of friends who they don't necessarily disagree with me. They're like, they
Mm-hmm.
see the wisdom of it, right? But they're like, well, I could put $30,000 into Amazon and make 150 or $200,000 versus like,
Right.
having to learn this whole brand new thing. So I'm just going to go do that, right? And then something bad happens, like, oh shit, I should have listened to you. Like, I know you. They always think that
Right. Right.
I'm
Right.
trying to sell them on EF or something. I like, no, man. Like, I'm trying to help you. It could be in a safer position. So a lot of people don't do it. They get addicted to the performance of Amazon. They never expand out.
Yeah, and to me, it sounds like a problem between the short-term thinking and the long-term thinking, right? So, in theory, you know that not putting all your eggs in one basket is a good thing to do, right? In theory, you know that long-term you have to diversify. But when you're seeing these profits that Amazon is making you money right now, you want to put as much as you want to put as much
Yeah,
money as
yeah.
possible there, right?
I often I say this all the time with email lists too, because we, like, shocking, we have people who build these giant email lists and they come to
Right.
sell with us and they're like, what's my email list worth? Like, well, have you ever emailed them? Like, no, I haven't. Like, well, it's worth nothing then, because you never it's like shown any monetization of
Absolutely.
it. But
Absolutely.
like, we all know, like, emailing people or diversifying is good, just like we all know going to the gym is good for you, but we don't,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
rationally, yes, that's good, but I'm going to eat this Twinkie instead. Right? Like, that's our
Yeah.
mentality.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, thanks a lot for this. I think this was very helpful. Where can people learn more about you and your business?
Yeah, so and thank you for having me. Hopefully your audience got a lot of value from it. You guys can come to our website at empireflippers.com. We also have a valuation tool that's all automated, is based off real sales data. If you want to see what your business is worth, like an evaluation range, it's not going to be the exact amount because it's an automated tool, of course, but you can go to empireflippers.com/valuation-tool for that. But for me, myself, you can find me on LinkedIn, Gregory Elfrink. I also just recently got back onto Facebook, so you can find me on there. I'm the only Gregory Elfrink on there, I think. So.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Hopefully see you soon.
Yeah, for sure, man.